Okay, so this is the Daf for May 9th, Erev Shabbat, 2025. We're in Shavuot, Daf 8. So here we go. The Gemara asks further, with regard to forbidden relations for which one might have thought the goat offering would atone as well, what are the circumstances? If you say the reference is to a case where he transgressed intentionally, then one can counter that he is subject to the death penalty, and so no offering will atone for his sin. And if you say the reference is to a case where he transgressed unwittingly, then one can counter that he is liable to bring his own sin offering for his transgression, and so the goat will not atone for him. The Gemara answers, the goat offering atones in a case where he transgressed intentionally, but witnesses did not forewarn him about his transgression, so he is not liable to receive the death penalty. It is also atones in a case where he transgressed unwittingly, but by the time Yom Kippur arrived, he had still not become aware of his transgression, so he was not liable to bring an offering. The Gemara asks further, concerning the bloodshed for which one might have thought that the goat would atone as well, what are the circumstances? If you say the reference is to a case where he transgressed intentionally, then one can counter that he is subject to the death penalty, so no offering will atone for his sin. And if you say the reference is to a case where he transgressed unwittingly, then one can counter that he is subject to go into exile, so the goat offering will not atone for him. The Gemara answers, the goat offering atones in a case where he transgressed intentionally, but witnesses did not forewarn him about his transgression, so he is not liable to receive the death penalty. It also atones in a case where he transgressed unwittingly, but by the time Yom Kippur arrived, he had still not become aware of his transgression, so he was not liable to bring an offering. Alternatively, it is referring to those cases for which the perpetrator is not subject to exile, where the death was caused in a way that was almost unavoidable, or where it was very close to being considered intentional. And I want to point out, so this is like, I was in a discussion, I think, with that Jeff Morgan from So Be It, about the oral tradition, the oral law, and that it's meant to be rules and laws and punishments that teach ethical behavior, and we can learn, moral implications from all these sorts of things. And it just reminds me right now, because it's talking about the forewarning of someone who commits a crime or a sin, and the whole idea of forewarning somebody or warning them, like when they're in the midst of trying to do something, is that you're separating yourself from them. So if you don't warn them, then it's almost as if you want something bad to happen to them. You want them to go to judgment. You want them to fall, stumble, something like that. But whenever you're forewarning somebody, you're actually showing love for them. You're also concerned that they do the right thing. You're also showing that you're designating that I am not part of that crime or that sin, and you're separating yourself. Just like we had in the last section, we had tractate Makot. We were dealing with groups of people, groups of witnesses, conspiring witnesses, and we also learned that if you're in a group that's doing a mitzvah, everybody in that group is included in that mitzvah. So whenever you have your siyum, everybody who comes to your siyum, when you finish that tractate, they're included in that as well. They're not just spectators, they're included in that. And it's just, it just goes to show how important it is for us to interact with each other and teach and encourage and inspire people by our lives. I was just having a joke with the kids of what an Israelite is. It's a light to the nations, right? You're an Israelite. So anyway, hopefully that inspires you. But anyway, let's go back to this. The Gemara answers, the goat offering atones in a case where he transgressed intentionally, but witnesses did not forewarn him about his transgression, so he is liable to receive the death penalty. It also atones in a case where he transgressed unwittingly, but at the time that Yom Kippur arrived, he still had not become aware of his transgression, so he was not liable to bring an offering. Alternatively, it is referring to those cases for which the perpetrator is not subject to exile, so where the death penalty was caused in a way that was almost unavoidable, or where it was very close to being considered intentional. So I already read that, but continuing. The Gemara continues to analyze the next part of the Braita. I did not put up the Braitot for this section yet, but I'll get to it. I keep forgetting. So the master said, Amar Mar, right? One might have thought that the goat offering would atone for these three types of impurities. To counter this, the verse states, quote, from the impurities of the children of Israel, Leviticus 16:16. The restrictive term from indicates that it atones for some impurities, but not for all impurities. What do we find is the impurity that the verse differentiates from all other impurities? We find it with regard to the defiling of the temple or its sacrificial foods. It is specifically for this transgression that the Torah provides one with the means of achieving atonement, that is, by bringing a sliding scale offering. So too here, since the verse limits the atonement of the goat offering to transgressions involving impurity, it is logical that it can also atone only for the defiling of the temple or its sacrificial foods. This is the statement of Rabbi Yehuda. The Gemara asks, in what way does the Torah differentiate the impurity of this transgression from the other types of transgressions? It is differentiated in that one brings a sliding scale offering to atone for it. But if that is a sufficient distinction, then say instead that the goat offering atones for idol worship. And in what way does the Torah differentiate it from other types of transgressions? Before answering, the Gemara interjects with a mnemonic that summarizes which cases it will suggest the goat offering should atone for. Idol worship, a woman after childbirth, a leper, a Nazarite, etc. The Gemara returns to answer its question. It is differentiated in that he brings a she-goat as a sin offering and not a ewe, which is the animal brought as a sin offering for other transgressions. Rav Kahana said, we said that the goat offering should atone for a transgression that the Torah differentiates in order to be lenient relative to the other transgressions. But this case of idol worship is one that the Torah differentiates in order to be stringent relative to other transgressions. Accordingly, the verse cannot be referring to idol worship. The Gemara asks, why not say instead that the goat offering atones for a woman after childbirth, as the Torah differentiates her from other people who must bring a sin offering following a period of impurity that she brings a sliding scale offering, whereas others bring a fixed sin offering? Rav Hoshaya said, the verse states, for all their sins, Leviticus 16:16, and not for all their impurities. There we go. Impurity and sin is not the same thing. So accordingly, since the offering brought by a woman after childbirth is not to atone for a sin, but due to the fact that she went through a period of ritual impurity, the goat offering will not atone for her. And that's where Christians, they kind of get things mixed up, as they think that impurity and sin are the same thing. And it's not. It's just that's how life is holy, is that there's different states that you're in at different periods of time. And there's different things you do to transition these states. Okay. The Gemara asks, but if so, according to Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, who says a woman after childbirth brings an offering because she is also a sinner, what is there to say? Under the intense pain of childbirth, a woman is apt to take an oath not to engage in intercourse in order to avoid becoming pregnant again. This is regarded as a sin because she will certainly violate that oath. The Gemara answers, Rabbi Shimon conforms to this line of reasoning, as he said in Braita, from its place. That is, from the verse about the atonement of the goat offering itself, it can be determined what the goat offering atones for. The Gemara asks, why not say that the goat offering atones for a leper, as the Torah differentiates him from other people who must bring a fixed offering following a period of impurity, and that he brings a sliding scale offering? Rav Hoshaya said, the verse states for all their sins and not for all their impurities. Accordingly, since the offering brought by a leper is not to atone for a sin, the goat offering will not atone for him. The Gemara asks, but if so, according to Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, who says leprous marks come upon a person for 7 matters, the 7 different sins, what is there to say? The Gemara answers, there it is his leprous mark that atones for his sin, and the offering is brought in order to permit him to re-enter the congregation after having been ostracized while he was a leper. The Gemara asks, but why not say that the goat offering atones for a Nazarite who became ritually impure, as the Torah differentiates him from other people who must bring an offering following a period of impurity, and that he brings doves or young pigeons? Rav Hoshaya said, the verse states, for all their sins, and not for all their impurities. Accordingly, since the offering brought by a Nazarite is not to atone for a sin, the goat offering will not atone for him. The Gemara asked, But if so, according to Rabbi Elazar HaKapar, who says a Nazarite is also a sinner because he unnecessarily abstained from wine, what is there to say? The Gemara answers, he holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, who says in a Braita, from its own place, that is, from the verse about the atonement of the goat itself, it can be determined that the goat offering atones for. The Gemara continues to clarify the next part of the Braita. The Master said, Rabbi Shimon says, it is not necessary to derive which transgressions the goat offering atones for by comparing the verse written concerning it to a different verse. Rather, from its own place, that is, from the verse about the atonement effected by the goat itself, it can be determined as it states, and he shall effect atonement upon the sanctuary, so from the impurities of the children of Israel. So which should be interpreted as saying that it atones for the defiling of anything sacred or kodesh, that is the temple or its sacrificial foods. The Gemara explains Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, asking, Rabbi Shimon is saying, well, why does Rabbi Yehuda disagree? The Gemara answers, Rabbi Yehuda could have said to you, that verse is necessary to teach that in the same manner that he performs the blood presentation in the innermost sanctum, the Holy of Holies, that is how he shall later perform them in the sanctuary. The Gemara asks, and how does Rabbi Shimon derive that halacha? That halacha is derived from the continuation of the verse, and so shall he do to the tent of meeting, the sanctuary. The Gemara asks, and what does Rabbi Yehuda derive from that part of the verse? The Gemara explains, he holds that if this halacha would be derived only from that part of the verse, I would say that he should bring another bull and goat, slaughter them and perform the blood presentations in the sanctuary with their blood. Therefore, the first part of the verse, and he shall effect atonement upon the sanctuary, teaches us that all the presentations are made with blood from the same bull and goat. The Gemara asks, why does Rabbi Shimon not need the first part of the verse to derive this? The Gemara explains that the verse, and so shall he do to the tent of meeting, indicates that the blood used in the tent of meeting, the sanctuary, is from the same bull and goat. The Gemara cites the next part of the Braita. The Master said, one might have thought that this goat offering would atone for all the cases of the defiling of the temple, even where there was awareness at the beginning and at the end. To counter this, the verse states, and from their acts of rebellion for all their sins, Leviticus 16:16, which indicates that the goat offering atones only for transgressions with regard to which the perpetrator is not subject to bring an offering brought by an individual to atone for himself. The Gemara asks, what is the case for which the goat offering does not atone? Where one had awareness at the beginning and had awareness at the end. The Gemara objects, but the person in that case is subject to atonement through an offering. If so, even without this verse, it would be obvious that the goat offering would not atone for him and absolve him from his obligation to bring an offering. The Gemara explains, no, the verse is necessary to teach that the goat does not atone for him in a case in which he became aware of his transgression close to sunset before the onset of Yom Kippur and was unable to bring his offering before Yom Kippur. In such a case, it might enter your mind to say that until he brings his sliding scale offering the day after Yom Kippur, the goat would suspend any punishment that he deserved. Therefore, the verse teaches us that since the transgression is of a type that is subject to an offering brought by an individual, the goat does not affect any atonement for it. The Gemara cites the next part of the Braita. The Master said, Amar Mar, from where is it derived that if a person had awareness at the beginning but did not have awareness at the end, that this goat suspends the punishment that he deserves until he becomes aware of his transgression? The Gemara challenges, why does the Braita ask, from where is it derived? What is it that the Braita finds difficult about this, that it searches for a proof for it? The Gemara explains, this is what the Braita finds difficult. Now that you have said that the goat atones only for sins that are similar to acts of rebellion, such as just as it atones for acts of rebellion that are not subject to atonement through an offering, so too it atones only for sins that are not subject to atonement through an offering. Why not compare them in a more restrictive manner and say, just as it atones only for acts of rebellion that are never subject to atonement through an offering, so too it atones or suspends judgment only for sins that are never and will never be subject to atonement through an offering. And what types of transgressions are they? They are in cases where one did not have awareness at the beginning but did have awareness at the end. But where he had awareness at the beginning but did not have awareness at the end, since when he becomes aware, he is subject to an offering. One could say that the goat will not even suspend his punishment. And if you say that the comparison should not be understood in this way, because for one who did not have any awareness at the beginning but did have awareness at the end, the goat whose blood presentation is performed outside the sanctuary in Yom Kippur itself atone, that is difficult. If the atonement is achieved through them, it is unnecessary for the verse to teach that atonement is not affected by the internal goat. Perforce, the comparison might be understood as the Baraita presents it. What then is the difficulty of the Baraita? The Gemara explains, it could enter your mind to say that we should reverse our conclusions about which offering atones for which type of transgression. In other words, one could say that the internal goat atones for the sin of one who did not have awareness at the beginning, and the external goat atones for sin one who did have awareness at the beginning. Yeah, okay. And if so, the comparison could be fully extended, as the Gemara suggested, and accordingly, one could have thought that the internal goat would not atone for one who had awareness at the beginning. To counter this, the verse states, for all their sins, which indicates by inference that the internal goat atones only for those who are potentially liable to bring a sin offering. That is a sliding scale offering, should they become aware of their sin. The Gemara challenges, but let one who is still not aware of his transgression achieve atonement, complete atonement, so that even should he later become aware of his transgression, he will not have to bring an offering. Why does the Baraita say that the goat only suspends the punishment? The Gemara answers, if it were written from their sins, it would be interpreted as you say. But now that it is written for all their sins, this indicates that it is referring to those sins whose commission will potentially cause a transgressor to become subject to an obligation to bring us an offering. The Gemara asks, but once it had been determined that the goat does not affect complete atonement, to what end does it suspend punishment? Rabbi Zera said the Baraita means to say that if he dies before he brings his offering, he dies without liability for sin. Rava said to him, if he dies, he does not need the offering to atone for him, since death itself cleanses him of all his sins. Rather, Rava said there is a different explanation. The Baraita means to say that the goat serves to protect him from being punished with suffering before he has brought his offering. The Mishnah teaches, for cases in which one did not have awareness at the beginning but had awareness at the end, the goat whose blood presentation is performed outside the sanctuary, the goat of the additional offering of Yom Kippur, and Yom Kippur itself atone. This is derived from the fact that the Torah juxtaposes the internal and external goats to teach that both atone only for cases in which one had awareness of his transgression at some point, although each offering atones in a different case. The Gemara comments, now the verse juxtaposes the two goats with each other to teach that they affect atonement for similar cases, but then let the internal goat atone both for itself and for cases that it normally atones for, and for that which the external goat normally atones for. And the practical difference will be in a case where, for some reason, the service of the external goat was not performed. The Gemara explains, the verse states, Aaron shall bring atonement upon its corners once a year, with the blood of the sin offering of atonement once in the year shall he make atonement for it throughout your generations. Exodus 30, verse 10. The emphasis of the repeated term once teaches that the goat affects one atonement for only one case, but cannot affect two atonements for two different cases. The Gemara challenges, but then let the external goat atone both for itself, that is, for the cases that it normally atones for, and for that which the internal goat normally does atone for. The practical difference will be in a case of the defiling of the temple or sacrificial foods that occurred between the offering of this goat and that goat. If it occurs after the internal goat's blood presentation, then the external goat will affect atonement for it. The Gemara explains, the verse states, Aaron shall bring atonement upon its corners once a year. Exodus 30, verse 10. The emphasis on the term once a year teaches that this atonement, for the specific case that it atones for, should be, and then at the beginning of 9 it says, only once a year. Okay, so thanks for watching.